Belfast is the UK's 10th largest city by population, yet despite that it holds the title as the 5th most congested. In 2018 alone, Belfast motorists spent an average of 190 hours stuck in traffic. With the cost of living making a car-centric lifestyle more and more unaffordable by the day, the population of our capital city needs a better way to commute to keep up with the times. The glider may answer that call to some, but even bus rapid transit has its limitations. With pedestrianisation on the rise all across the city, and more people turning towards public transportation to try and beat the congestion, there is only one clear option for our future. In today's video, we will discuss just how Belfast could re-implement light rail for the first time in just over 150 years, and why such a system would be transformational for the city. Light rail, or trams, are a technology that was the first major public transport network in Belfast, but now 150 years since its conception, all that remains are distant memories and the odd remnant of track that often peeks through the potholed asphalt. But light rail could be the solution that Belfast's public transport network needs after all these years. The glider was brought in by the Department for Infrastructure as a way to improve Belfast's public transport network, yet countless studies have shown that bus rapid transit is inferior to light rail transit. The glider has a lot of serious problems also, like poor traffic prioritisation, improperly enforced bus lanes, lenient penalties for abusing the law and or glider staff, and a lack of planned connectivity with Belfast Grand Central Station. Some of these issues, like the lack of planned connectivity with Grand Central Station, are something that can be fixed relatively easy, but those of you who understand what the DFI are like will understand that easy doesn't always mean what it should mean. But the bigger issues, like traffic prioritisation and bus lane enforcement, are much bigger and will require a lot more effort to stamp out. But what if, whilst we strive to complete those changes, we implemented light rail in key areas of the city at the same time? Now, to some, the idea of integrating light rail now is stupid or pointless or even a waste of money, but I will do my best to explain why that is not the case. Let's take a look at the G2 route of the Belfast Glider BRT network and how it could be converted to LRT. The G2 glider route is, in my opinion, in the most optimal position to be converted to light rail transit based on a couple of key factors. Factor number 1, the route length is short and only has one reversal point thanks to the City Hall roundabout. Factor 2, the route avoids traffic at every opportunity with the least amount of traffic interactions possible. And Factor 3, the route is a supporter of the tourism industry in Titanic Quarter and means the profit margin is already high. G2 starts at City Hall and ends at Catalyst in Titanic Quarter. The BRT runs constantly in a sort of loop, using the area around Donegal Square as a roundabout for the service. There is currently a large amount of debate around the potential for pedestrianising the area around City Hall and Donegal Square, including Donegal Place, Castle Place and Royal Avenue. This development would be a perfect excuse to lay down the rails and electrics for a light rail network that would take over the G2 route. But how would a light rail G2 operate, and what changes would be needed to ensure it is effective? Well, firstly, coming out of Donegal Square to the west, the trams would then take a left onto the newly reorganised Great Victoria Street, with all roadside parking removed, and all private car traffic would be banned on the street between Bruce Street and Wellington Place. The reason for this is that Blackstaff Square will also soon be pedestrianised, meaning the only access road the Great Victoria Street would be used for on that section would be Glengall Street and the Grosvenor Road. But once the Weavers Cross development begins, Glengall Street will be mostly pedestrianised also. The trams would then turn right onto Bruce/Hope Street, where it can be reorganised to have the tram line run alongside a new two-way road, so Sandy Row residents can enter and exit their places of residence with ease. Turning right again onto Durham Street, the street in front of Grand Central Station would be fully pedestrianised, and they could even put in a flagship canopied light rail halt right in front of the new railway station. Then the Grosvenor Road, but with Donegal Square pedestrianised and the section of Great Victoria Street closed to private cars, the section of the Grosvenor Road between Great Victoria Street and Durham Street would be rendered useless, meaning it could also be made car free. And no, I do not care about the Value Cabs car park that would be rendered useless as a result. That would be their own problem for building car dependent infrastructure in an area of Belfast that is on the cusp of a pedestrianisation revolution. These upgrades to Great Victoria Street and its surrounding area would also mean that trams would be able to traverse the area with complete ease and safety. Plus, trams crossing back over Great Victoria Street and onto Donegal Square North would face zero conflict, as the roads they would be traversing would be carless and not require traffic signals. Now for the journey to Titanic Quarter. First, crossing back over Great Victoria Street and heading on to Donegal Square. Once past Donegal Square North, the trams would then exit Chichester Street and onto Victoria Street to the left. This would require Victoria Street to have its bus lane turned into a tram lane, and the next lane over become the bus lane, reducing the total private car lanes to 2 and 3 at different sections of the road. The trams would then turn right onto Queen Square and right again onto the A2 and across the bridge. Trams coming off of Queen Square onto the A2 and across the Queen Elizabeth Bridge would ideally be met with reduced private car lanes on the slip road and the bridge, with only a single slip lane and a maximum of 2 other lanes on the bridge itself, with left turns coming off of the Queen Elizabeth Bridge banned completely, as Queen's Quay would become a pedestrianised zone. Now at this point I must stress that at any time I mention a tram crossing a road, I mean this with utter priority. Like with the Lewis tram service in Dublin, at any point when a tram must cross over a road for private vehicles, the tram will be given the signal to go as soon as physically possible. This system would be paramount to a Belfast tram network operating efficiently. Once across the Queen Elizabeth Bridge, the trams would then carry on along Queen's Quay. As they approach the Sydenham Road, however, they will be met with this roundabout. The roundabout where Queen's Quay, Station Street and the Sydenham Road all meet would call for serious reorganisation in the area. Firstly, you would need to remove the roundabout and car park slip road. Then, cap Station Street off at the junction with Scrabo Street so that cars can still exit the apartment complex onto Middlepath Street. This means Queen's Quay and Station Street Bridge would phase into one another as they link up with the Sydenham Road. But what about the wasteland turned car park on the other side of the roundabout, I hear you ask? Well, that could be very easily turned into an extension of the green area outside of the Odyssey Arena, with sprinkler systems to keep the plants watered while underneath the underpass. Now, obviously an underpass doesn't scream botanical haven, but it does provide an immense amount of shade, and it isn't a very loud underpass to be underneath. So in warm or rainy weather, it has every potential to provide for a sheltered outdoor park that I am certain many people would get a use out of. The main portion of the Sydenham Road is a little complex, but the way I see it, the south side of the road, which runs alongside the car park, can be made into a two-way road that has the sole purpose of feeding cars in and out of the car park at the SSE, where the road would then end. That means the two-way tram line would hug the north side of the road, adjacent to the arena grounds, and this would obviously require some reorganisation of the existing junction where Queen's Road, Sydenham Road and the motorway slip roads meet. But it is a change that is small, realistic, and junctions that require you to cross the junction diagonally already exist in Northern Ireland, so it is not a new concept. The tram line and roadway would be best separated here via a concrete divider like the axle bender curbs you see along the Donegal Road. The trams would then take a left onto Queen's Road. Now, Queen's Road has two potential modes of operation the way I see it. First, with the road being made completely car-free, with only access being granted to trams, buses, and permitted private vehicles, such as for loading and unloading. The other option is to operate a tram-in-road method that exists all over the world. Essentially, the two inner lanes of the road are converted to tram only, and all of the existing halts would be then moved along it. Each halt would then have a raised zebra crossing at each end of the platforms, meaning cars would be encouraged to drive slowly and stop at the same time to allow people to safely access the tram halts. Installing speed bumps at set intervals along the road would also be beneficial to ensure public safety. Towards the end of the Queen's Road, there is a rather huge area of wasteland that would be absolutely perfect for a new state-of-the-art maintenance facility so trams can go in for repairs, reupholstering, maintenance, cleaning and refuelling. After reaching the end of the line at Titanic Quarter, the trams would then meet a newly revamped catalyst halt with a 3 to 4 track end, so the station has the capacity to allow for a reversal of the service. The trams would then proceed to make the final leg of their journey back to the city centre as they head through Queen's Road and off back onto the Sydenham Road. Once off of the Sydenham Road, the trains would then head onto Station Street Bridge, which would now be completely car free. As the trams come off the newly pedestrianised bridge, there would need to be a new tram priority traffic signal installed at the exit of the bridge so that trams coming off of the Station Street Bridge can get onto the Queen's Bridge quickly and safely. Did I mention there's a bridge? Once on the Queen's Bridge, the tram would then quickly move over to the leftmost lane and take a left onto Oxford Street. Oxford Street would operate almost as a mirror to the adjacent Victoria Street, with the rightmost lane being used for trams only, and the lane to the left of which for buses only, reducing the amount of private car lanes to a maximum of 2 for the majority of the street. Once at the bottom of Oxford Street and turning right, May Street would be completely pedestrianised, with limited access for the rear entrance to the courts. The trams would then cross Victoria Street at the final priority junction and head onto Donegal Square, where they would complete the loop of the G2. So that is the very basic fundamentals of my suggestion, and of course some arterial roads would need to be capped off so the cars cannot accidentally enter the tram lines, but this is easily done with automatic steel bollards that can raise or lower as needed for certain buses or emergency services to get through. This idea is by far the most feasible I am capable of formulating, and it comes with many positive knock-on effects. The pedestrianisation of Donegal Square and its surroundings would mean that condensing Victoria Street and Oxford Street would be completely reasonable, as there would no longer be a need to have so many lanes of traffic being funneled into the city centre, as the amount of through traffic would be reduced to an all-time low. The pedestrianisation boost to the city centre would also help drive up footfall and make the retail heart of Belfast thrive even more than it currently does, and would likely mean less empty shop fronts, safer streets, and better tourism opportunities as a result. Other good considerations to coincide this development would be to close all Westlink slip roads and finally halt the funneling of traffic off of the M1 motorway and right into Belfast city streets, which are already clogged with more than enough traffic. Closing these 4 slip roads would also help make crossing from east to west Belfast feel less like crossing a raging river and more like walking down a street as it once was before the Westlink was constructed. You could even go one further and cover the whole section of that motorway below ground and then use the renewed space to build a park, finally connecting the 2 sides of the city in an inviting and attractive way that makes good use of a previously destructive segregation tactic. Implementing these changes, even in small stages, would be beyond transformational for Belfast's traffic situation, meaning the majority of vehicles that would be in the city centre would be delivery vehicles for businesses where applicable, and residents, again where applicable, public transportation vehicles and emergency vehicles also. Okay, so if all of what I mentioned is possible from an engineering standpoint, why are we here, and why do we have bus rapid transit instead of light rail? The biggest issue for the Department for Infrastructure is cost. The creation of conventional light rail transit in the UK has some of the highest costs for the systems in the world, with road and rail projects in the UK costing up to 850% more than their mainland European counterparts. But despite this, the sheer principle that light rail transit can turn a significant profit means that such a development would be a worthwhile venture given enough time. With the average cost per kilometre being £50 million in the UK to build LRT, the cost to refit the G2 route to an LRT line would be in the ballpark of £350 million to £400 million. This is a large amount of money to any one person, but when compared to the £500 million Weaver Cross project or the suggested £1.5 billion, which is 1,500 million, upgrade to the A5, it really isn't that expensive when it comes to implementing LRT. Now I will note that the cost of things is a dog whistle used by NIMBYs who don't like the idea of public transport getting the same treatment as road users because my tax money paid for it. After all, when you are accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression, a quote I often think about and the very issue we see today all over the world as people push for public transport improvements that face backlash from the car-centric mind of some of the world's most developed nations. So let's say hypothetically this new rail line is built and all the funding is allocated, and Belfast now has a tram service for the first time in almost 70 years. How long could we expect this new glider light rail service to turn a profit? Well, to figure that out, we would normally have to look at the big statistics and then break them down, but this is a tram line that is replacing the glider G2 route, so we actually already know a lot of the data. So with the majority of figures already known, it gives us an approximate annual passenger flow of 2.8 million people, with the average person buying a day ticket at a cost of £4.20, times 2.8 million by that figure, and you get an estimated annual income of £11.7 million. But that is before the operational costs, and since the operational costs typically range an average from 40 to 60% of yearly revenue, we will sit in the middle and say that our yearly operational costs for the GLR is about 50% of our annual revenue. That leaves us with a yearly potential profit of £5.85 million. Now, at first glance, that obviously would mean that for Glider Light Rail to pay itself off, it would take about 60 years. However, there is a major boost to the yearly passenger flow on the way. Titanic Quarter is currently in the midst of a huge regeneration project. At current, the foundations of the loft lines are being constructed right next to the Titanic Museum. The loft lines will be a mixed-use development on a 3.8-acre site, providing more than 700 new homes to the Titanic Quarter area. But the best part about it all is that it will be a completely car-free development designed to encourage walking and cycling in the city. The loft lines is one of, if not the biggest reason as to why Belfast seriously needs to make the necessary steps to construct this new light rail route. Also, as I edit this video today, I have to rewrite my script, as just the other day it was revealed that there is now another development coming to the Titanic Quarter area in the form of student accommodation. According to the Northern Ireland Planning Portal, a submission for approval has been put forward on the 29th of September 2023 to develop an area of wasteland just northeast of Olympic House and south of the Belfast Metropolitan College's TQ campus. Details on said development are scarce as of current, but from the site location plan it appears to be around a 5-acre site that would likely incorporate more than one building due to the sheer footprint that one building would take up. Although there could be plans for a park alongside the development, which would explain the large space, and TQ does lack a formal park for residents to enjoy. Aside from the upcoming developments, TQ also hosts places of residence, education, employment and tourism, most notably the Titanic Museum and the Titanic Film Studios. With a new tram line going to TQ, these locations will be served directly with a faster, more frequent service than ever before. And with the further pedestrianisation of the TQ area to accommodate the new tram line, walkability and safety of the Titanic Quarter area will be increased exponentially. Glider Light Rail would very well become the backbone of Titanic Quarter's local and tourism industry, shuttling workers, locals and tourists alike to and from their places of interest, employment and residence. Glider Light Rail, or GLR as I like to call it, would thus generate huge amounts of income as time goes on, very likely doubling if not tripling its yearly revenue within a span of 10 to 15 years. Such an increase in revenue would mean the time for the GLR to pay itself off would be reduced to around 20 years, and with 10 years of operation already under its belt by that point, this means there would likely be only about 10 years left until the books turn green. But that isn't even the biggest supporting factor for my GLR plan. Belfast Grand Central Station is due to be fully open by 2025, and if my suggestions were implemented, tourists, locals and commuters alike would be able to easily depart their train or bus at Grand Central Station, head outside and hop straight onto a tram that would then take them straight to wherever in the city their destination may be. And with many hotels in the Titanic Quarter and city centre areas, a connection to Grand Central Station would mean tourists coming in and out from the rest of the country, Republic of Ireland or abroad would be able to get straight into the heart of our capital city quickly and easily, which would continue to drive up the passenger flow and yearly revenue. The final major supporting factor of the GLR is the SSE Arena. The SSE attracts thousands of guests daily, and during ice hockey matches or concerts, the venue can pull in tens of thousands of visitors all in one go. With a halt in both directions at the front of the arena, people would be able to get to the SSE in the most convenient way possible. GLR would also save you a lot of time and money on your daily commute. If you currently drive to work within Belfast, and if you so happen to drive between the city centre and Titanic Quarter, then you should listen up. The amount of money the average motorist spends per year travelling between the city centre and TQ, or vice versa, is quite a lot, especially if you're a student, disabled, or of low income. £1,040 for petrol, £500 for insurance, £180 for road tax, no more than £50 for an MOT by UK law, £120 for breakdown cover, and about £120 per year in general upkeep. That is a grand total of just over £2,000 per year, just so you can travel to and from work, school, college, university, etc. But what about commuting by GLR? Well, there are 260 work days in a year, and if the average person buys a day ticket at the current glider price of £4.20, then the cost for you to make that same commute all year round via the GLR would be just £1,092, a near £1,000 difference. So what about the precious hours of your life not wasted sitting in Belfast traffic? Well, for car users, a round trip from the city centre to TQ, or vice versa, across 8 kilometres takes approximately 50 minutes at peak times, according to Google Maps traffic data, whereas on the GLR, the trip would be much quicker. With only 9 stops spread across 8 kilometres of the tram line, you would ideally want an average speed of 30 kilometres per hour, and an average dwell time of 13 to 17 seconds. This would give us a round trip on the GLR of just some 34 minutes. So by commuting by car, you would be spending around 216 hours of the year commuting, but with the GLR, it would be a mere 147 hours. That means 32% of your commute every year is wasted by taking the car, by being stuck in traffic. We as a country can also push our government to work towards helping cut the cost of light rail transit construction, as the astronomical costs of LRT construction is one of the major factors why light rail is so rare on our islands. In comparison, tramways in France have costed as little as £29 million per mile, whereas a new tram line in Manchester once cost £252 per mile. The cost of infrastructure in the UK at current is very, very high, and we all need to do what we can to see it drop. So after the GLR is implemented, what would happen to the surplus glider rolling stock? The surplus glider rolling stock would actually be a brilliant benefit for Translink and the DFI, as they would then have the option to run a new service with the surplus buses, or even use them to increase the frequency and capacity along the current G1 route. With G3 and an expansion of G2 planned for the future, it is vital we begin this conversation now, before the DFI make another mistake in choosing BRT over LRT. Do I believe the Department for Infrastructure have the drive, courage and forward thinking needed to implement such an LRT route? Well, no, at least not in the short term. This is why FundTheNINE completely supports Green Party NI's call for Stormont to give Belfast City Council independent transport powers, so that the very people that live, commute and attend education in the city have a voice to change the way we travel within it for the better for the foreseeable future. So I pass the question on to you watching this. Do you wish to see trams return to Belfast streets? Did you find yourself in agreement with any of the proposals put forward on the channel here today? If so, then let us know what you think in the comments, and if you're feeling really brave, send an email or maybe even a letter to the Department for Infrastructure and tell them how you feel. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like, subscribe and share the video far and wide so we can share the message that Northern Ireland wants and needs serious public transport infrastructure investment. Goodbye.